Thursday, August 8th, 2024. I'm Larissa, fat girl Larissa, laying in bed. So, feeling handicapped today. I'm feeling handicapped today. Um, got up, had my tea, right? And that's fine. But my arm and leg are having spasms, and my arm's been locking. And when my arm locks, my leg locks too. And so Omar went into work, and I'm here by myself, so I'm afraid to get in the shower. And I'm afraid to walk down the stairs. I'm really afraid of the shower because if I fall, I can't get up. I'll be stuck in the shower all day till he gets home. So I'm feeling handicapped today. My arm and my leg, they don't lock every day. And that's happened. I've had that happen off and on since they gave me that test drug at that hospital. So yesterday I was talking about United Nations. It wasn't just bullshit. So I'll expand on a couple things. First, before I talk about the United Nations, neighbor up the street, who I said his wife is a cunt. She is, and this is why I said this. So we first moved in here, or early on when we first bought this house. Driving back and forth up and down the street, I could smell somebody's septic, and everybody back here is on septic. There's nobody back here. City water ends like 2 miles down the road, so everybody back here has septic or leach fields and wells, right? Well, I could smell human shit when I drove down the street. I didn't know which house it was coming from. I just knew I could smell it. Well, then that's a problem for everybody's well, right? If I'm smelling your human shit because your septic needs pumped, then it's your leach field is it is saturated. You need to fix shit, literally. So I didn't know whose it was, and I didn't want to go around knocking on doors, so I just called the county. I called the county and I said, I can smell somebody's shit on my street. I knew it wasn't horse shit. They had a couple horses up there. It wasn't horse shit. If it had been horse shit, I wasn't going to be worried about horse shit. It was human shit. So, evidently, they came out and they were doing construction on their property, and they hadn't lived there. They had been living someplace else. He'd been working in Sacramento or something. They'd been living out in Sacramento or something. He told me this. He and I got along just fine. But the county came out and said, "Hey, you got to take care of your septic," and because they were getting the house ready to move into. They were moving back into it, right? Rather than they had been renting it. So I didn't know all of this. I didn't find this out until somebody had sent an anonymous letter to people on the street saying, "Oh, it's a death trap here, blah 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 blah." It was this obnoxious letter. And I had been trying to get everybody on the street to kind of organize together a little bit because I saw what was going on. They were going to close that fire station, blah 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 blah, and all this shit. And the water stuff, and nobody else was paying any attention to, and whatever. So I went up to talk to them one day. I decided I was going to just go knock on people's doors, go talk to my neighbors. And she was there. And with another woman. I was like, "Hi," and introduced myself because I hadn't met them. And she got all shitty. She's like, "Somebody, can you believe somebody called the county on us?" And I said, "Oh," I said, "that was me. I could smell human shit, and I didn't want it in my well." And she was like, "Ah." And I said, "Did you get this?" I said, "Did you get this letter?" She's like, "Why do you have to be so intense?" She says, "But I'm like intense. Human shit in your well is a problem. You want to see intense." So I am like biting my tongue, and I had this letter um put together for that I was dropping off with everyone. It had a checklist of like common concerns that we all had on this street, having to do with, the fire station and safety and water and blah 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 blah. I was like, okay, just tell me what your priorities are on this. Let's have a meeting about this and talk about what our strategy is going to be as a street. So I showed this to her, and she's like, "Oh," she goes, "Larissa, I don't have time for this right now." She says, "We do a big party in October, and 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 we can all," she says, "I'll organize it and take care of it." Like, I'm like, "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm coming here because but she was like, "My sons," she has twin sons. She's, "My sons are graduating from high school, and I just started a new job, and blah 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 blah." She goes, "We'll powwow on it." And when she said that to me, "We'll powwow on it," I said, "Oh," because it was August when I went in. It was powwow season, and I said, "Oh," I said, "What tribe are you affiliated with?" And she's like, "I'm not." She's, I'm not Indian," and I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "I don't think you know what that word means." I'm like, "Oh, are we gonna smoke 'em peace pipe too, lady?" I'm like, "Oh my God." So that's why I don't like her. That's why I don't like her. She's a bitch. Anyway, back to me feeling handicapped today and being afraid to get in the shower. And then I have to sit and think about this shit. So the UN. So what was I talking about with that Dear John letter campaign? We were living in Oakland, and Kamala Harris was district attorney in the state. They had they the district attorney partnered with the United Nations Association, which at the time I was a member of. I was a member of that for like 2 years, very briefly, and I did not renew. I was like, I don't want anything to do with this bullshit after this happened. So there were when the Dear John letter campaign was an anti-human trafficking campaign, and it was multi-pronged. So there was distribution of flyers and materials to certain businesses in high traffic areas, which eventually became law that all of these businesses in California have to post this information on what to do, like information on how to where to call to get assistance to get out of human trafficking, right? And we were taking them around to like bars and nail salons and massage parlors and things like that, places where there are high concentrations of industries where there are high concentrations of trafficked persons. So I was taking that information around. I wasn't getting paid to do it. I didn't work for the government, but these were things these were their initiatives. It also included in neighborhood organizing meetings, which I was on the steering committee for neighborhood crime prevention council in that district that I lived, the district that we lived in. So we were distributing at meetings to community members. They were logs. It was a log sheet, and it was just for certain neighborhoods where, again, where there were high concentrations of of child prostitutes in particular, right? Um, and it was and they would turn tricks in these certain neighborhoods, and our neighborhood was really really high traffic for child exploitation. So They would turn tricks in these parking lots, and one of the parking lots, it wasn't really a parking lot, it was a cul-de-sac, a little turnaround. It was outside of our building across the train tracks. I could see it from my windows. And it was also where the county set up for their needle exchange weekly and HIV testing, free HIV testing, and clean needles and stuff like that. And passed out condoms and stuff. I used to take socks and clean underwear, like new underwear and bras and stuff over to them too. Condoms. I used to donate condoms to the needle exchange. Anyway, we were distributing these logs to people in the neighborhood to write down the license plates of the cars that were parking in these lots, for these children, little girls, to turn tricks. It was horrible to watch. It was horrible to watch. Watch all these like adolescent girls, teenage girls turning tricks right there outside my window, right? And there were a lot of like there were a lot of streets and stuff like that, and so we'd go and we'd distribute these logs to people. And then you would turn your log in at your NCPC meeting, and then those would get taken to whoever the fuck it was at the county, city, state level, whatever. And they would send a letter to the address where that license plate was registered, right, to where the vehicle was registered, saying, "Oh, just so you know, thank you for visiting. Thank you for when you're visiting Oakland, this is your car has been cited, in this neighborhood that is known for trafficking and high crime, blah 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 blah. You might want to make sure you might want to park someplace different. This is a better place to park." So it wasn't a letter that said, "Oh, we know you were in Oakland buying children." It was, "We saw your car, and we want you to know that that's not a safe neighborhood, right? You might want to go somewhere else." And so the idea was, because a lot of the people that came in, most of the people that came in for this weren't from Oakland, right? Oakland residents who were buying prostitutes were buying older ladies, right? Which, I don't want to be a prostitute. Like, I don't want to be selling that. But I personally think sex work should be legal for adults. But for children, that's another thing altogether, right? So people who are coming in buying kids were coming in from outside of the city. And the idea was that, then people in their home, because most of them don't live alone. They live at home with mom or grandma or married or whatever. And then it's kind of like, what are you doing in Oakland, in this neighborhood? What were you doing there? Right? Kind of thing. So I was doing this work, distributing this information, right? And collecting, because I was on the steering committee of the NCPC, and when we'd have our meetings, our monthly meetings open to the public, then I was helping to collect this information and all that shit. Well, then it won me some enemies. Hmm? And there were a couple pimps that were following me everywhere I went. I was getting harassed by pimps because they were mad that we were doing this work, right? Because it was cutting into their business. So there were these three guys in particular that started following me everywhere I went. And I had my regular appointments, nail appointments, whatever, grocery shop. I went grocery shopping the same day, every week. Like, I had a really, really regimented schedule because there was all this stuff that I was doing, these meetings and things, and choir and, you know, everything that I was doing. And then my art shows on top of that. hmm So they were following me everywhere and threatening me, um, places that I went. So I was trying to, like, I was starting to get really anxious about it because, when you have guys following you around, it's a little creepy. right? It was the same three guys. And um, sometimes they'd make, no, it's one guy one guy in a van who'd follow me around whenever I was out walking around. I'm gonna make money off your ass. Hey, baby, you know it. You know I'm gonna make money off of your ass. And one time he tried to get me in the van, and oh my God, it was awful. It was awful. So this one day, I was out, and these guys were, they followed me to like 6 different places. And I was trying to like go different places, like, like, um, I was going to a different grocery store than what I normally went to, and they were following me all over, right? And I tried to go home, and I thought I lost them, but when I got home, they were there. They were parked in front of the building, or not in front of the building. They were parked over, kind of in front of the building. It was over in the cul-de-sac where the needle exchange set up and where the little girls turn tricks. Well, they were watching me, and I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag, and I ran down, got in my car, and I went to the airport, and I tried to buy a ticket to go back to Pittsburgh to see I was like, I just need to get out of town. I need to get away from this. Um, I wasn't sure if I was going to come back or not because I wasn't receiving, like, to be on the Neighborhood Crime Prevention Council. That was partnered with the police, right? And I was not getting any kind of support in my life, either from the police or from the United Nations, either one, right? Like, as far as like safety was concerned, like, they were more than happy to let me be the foot soldier to go out and pass out this information, but then they didn't want to do anything to support me, right? I wasn't getting paid or nothing, but it was like I did was doing all this fucking work for them for free. So I get to the airport, and my credit card won't work to buy the ticket. And the ticket wasn't that expensive. It was like $538 or something to fly directly into Pittsburgh. And I knew that I had the money on the card. I knew I did. I knew I did. But the card wouldn't go through. And every card I gave them, I had 2 credit cards and my debit card, and it was like they were all frozen. The woman kept saying, it's declined, it's declined, it's declined. I'm like, it's declined? Well, I was terrified. I couldn't get on a plane then. And I didn't want to go home because they were still there when I left, right? And I had no idea, like, did they follow me to the airport? What is going on? I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. So there were Alameda County sheriffs at the airport. And so I went to one of them. I said, look, I'm trying to get on a plane to go back to Pittsburgh. I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm afraid to go home. And I told him why. I said, there's these guys that are following me around. Well, and he was partners with Kevin Nishida. This was before Kevin Nishida, who was murdered, was doing security, because Kevin Nishida, he quit the police force and started doing private security, and he was murdered on the job doing private security for a news crew in Oakland. Anyway, this Kevin Nishida was this guy's partner, and he took my ID. He went and made a phone call, and they came back and whispered something to Kevin Nishida and told me. Then he turned to me and he told me he was detaining me. And Kevin Nishida said, are you sure you want to do that? He says, are you sure this is the right choice? He goes, and this officer, Luna, turns to Kevin Nishida and says, don't worry, I'll take the heat for this one if there's any fallout. That's what he said to him. So next thing I know, there's a fucking like group of like 3 EMTs, but they're not just EMTs, they're military. They were fucking military, and The one woman, she had a UN patch on her arm, and they strapped me down. I wasn't just detained. I was restrained. And I wasn't like flipped I wasn't flipping out or anything. I was just scared. I was scared because I was being trailed by pimps, and I didn't know why my credit card wouldn't work. So we got she gets me into the back of this unmarked fucking ambulance, right? And she's like reading all this paperwork. She's like showing me this paperwork. She goes, you need to read this and sign this. Well, she says, can you read? She goes, can you sign your name? And I looked at her because I was strapped down. My hands, my wrists, my upper arms, my legs. I was at my ankles and across my thighs. I had a strap across my. They had me like I was totally like, oh, it wasn't a straitjacket, but I was tied up like it was. And I'm like, no, I can't sign my name. She goes, I understand with your people. She says, I saw it in Bosnia. And I was like, what? Like, she thought I was illiterate. She was like, I'm just like, I can't sign anything because you have me strapped down. And so she goes, I'll sign these papers for you. I'll sign your name for you. I have no idea what she fucking signed because I wasn't allowed to read it. I couldn't hold it to look at it. And and she signed my name. This bitch signed my name. And she identified, I mean, she had a patch on her arm. And then they take me to the county. They take me to County Clink and they shot me up with some test drug and I almost died. Had seizures. Oh my God. And in the intake, there was this guy that was screaming and yelling. This woman's like, the woman that's talking to me, she's like, how many drugs are you on? I'm like, I'm not on any drugs. She's like, how much marijuana do you smoke? I'm like, hardly any, because I didn't. I don't, and I still don't. I mean, I have my tea in the morning, right? Like, but I'm not a huge consumer, right? Most of what I consume is topical or in my tea. And this guy who's like strapped down, I wasn't strapped down anymore. I was sitting in a chair. He was strapped down like I was strapped down in the ambulance. And he's straining his head and he's like screaming and spitting at me. And he's like, caffeine and cigarettes are drugs too. You're on drugs. And he's like screaming at me. It was like crazy. It was crazy. It was crazy. And like I said, they shot me with this drug and I had a rolling seizure. My tongue rolled up in my mouth and my hands and I was like all shaken. And they left me in this concrete room on a cot covered in plastic. And I think they were expecting me to die, right? And eventually I passed out in with the seizure. Um, I could have swallowed my tongue out. It was bad. It was really bad. When I woke up, I was blind and I was numb, kind of like from the waist down. And oh, it was really bad. It was really, 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 really bad. But ever since that, I get this thing with my arm and my leg, they lock, and it's scary. And when like if I'm standing when it happens, my right leg kicks up, and it's weird because it feels like my leg is weightless, right? Like it just kind of like moves, and it's involuntary. And it used to happen a lot. It used to happen regularly, and there for a while after like in the months right after I was released, um, you know, when I'd wake up in the morning, I wouldn't be able to move for a little bit. And I thought we have the name of this drug supposedly that they gave me, and it was a test drug. It was a test drug, and I had top tier side effects. Like, and one of the top tier side effects was sudden death, right? Like it could have killed me. Mm. But all these other weird things. And oh my God, it still happens. So I'm just a little upset right now. I'm just a little upset. I gotta think about it. So, Hamilton O'Harris, that's why this is why. This is why. This is where my personal what's going to be done? How am I going to be compensated? What is my recompense for this? Right? I used to perform. And part of the reason I used to do it was because I knew that this was coming, right? Because the government did that to me. The government did that to me. Did this to me. Yeah. So, excuse me if I'm not a fan of the UN.